Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight we're setting sail for the shimmering, disease-ridden fantasy that was early Jamestown, England's first permanent settlement in North America, and quite possibly the worst group vacation ever organised by men with swords and zero survival skills. You're not an explorer. You're not a pioneer. You're a disposable economic experiment in human misery, stuffed into a damp wooden coffin with a crew of unwashed optimists and told there's gold just lying around in the woods. There isn't. But by the time you realise that, you'll already be too weak to argue. Before your fingers go numb from salt poisoning or you slip into a pleasant starvation coma, go ahead and like the video and subscribe, but only if bleak, softly spoken historical suffering is your thing. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. It's oddly comforting to know who else is lying awake contemplating colonial collapse. Now close your eyes, take a deep breath, and try to conserve your strength. You're going to need it. Winter is coming, and so is the cannibalism. It starts with a story, not one you tell, but one you're told, in a smoky tavern, through ale-soaked whispers and the slurred promises of men who have never seen a day's labour in their lives. Virginia, they say, is a land of opportunity, a place where the rivers run clean, the natives are friendly, and gold glitters just beneath the soil, waiting for someone clever or lucky enough to dig it up. You don't need skill, you don't need wealth, you just need to be English and breathing. And if you're lucky, or at least unlucky enough to be desperate, you might even get picked to go. You're not a scholar, you're not a soldier, you're certainly not anyone important. You're what England produces in excess, surplus. Maybe you're the son of a tenant farmer, used to scraping mud from your boots and hoping the harvest lasts long enough to keep your teeth. Or you're a half-starved apprentice, who never quite learned a trade, or a former soldier with no war left to fight. Just blisters and memories and too many debts. Or maybe you're a third son of minor gentry with no land, no prospects, and a pride so bloated it would rather rot abroad than beg at home. Whoever you are, England has no use for you, and you've started to believe it. So when the pamphlet finds its way into your hands, promising gold, land, a fresh start, you don't ask questions. The drawings show tidy cottages and fat livestock. The text promises a mild climate, fertile fields, and a place in God's divine colonial plan. It's propaganda. But you don't know that word yet. What you know is that the rent is overdue, the bread is stale, and the nights are long and full of shame. You're not going to Virginia because you believe in it. You're going because everything behind you has already failed. The recruiters come next, well-dressed men with papers and seals and expressions that hover somewhere between boredom and disdain. They tell you what you want to hear, that you're needed, that the colony will make you rich, that England honours her brave sons. What they don't tell you is that the company charter says nothing about your comfort, only your labour, your obedience, and your ability to stay alive long enough to make them a profit. You sign anyway, or more likely, you mark the paper with an X, trying not to think about what you've just sold. You've never owned land. You've never even left your county. But now, you're part of something grand, a venture, an expedition, a glorious imperial dream, a gamble. You try to prepare. You pack what you can, a blanket, a knife, maybe a spare shirt if you're lucky. There are rumours about bringing seeds, farming tools, fishing gear. No one knows what's true. You ask, but the answers vary wildly depending on who you talk to. Some men say you'll be eating fruit from the trees and venison off the bone within the week. Others advise you to learn how to boil your boots. You don't know which to believe, so you believe both. Just in case, you say goodbye to whatever scraps of life you had. If you have family, they weep. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they're relieved. One less mouth to feed, one less burden. Maybe you tell your mother you'll send for her when you've made your fortune. Maybe you lie to your children, promising them a better life once you've built your house in the new world. Maybe you leave quietly, without farewell, because no one was looking for you to begin with. The dock is chaos. You arrive at Portsmouth and find dozens like you, thin men with hollow eyes and nervous laughter, clutching their bundles and squinting at the hulking shapes of ships rocking in the harbour. The smell hits first: salt, fish, rotting wood, and the sour stench of hundreds of unwashed bodies crammed too close together. The Susan Constance is your assigned vessel. It's smaller than you imagined. Somehow, it's also more terrifying. Its hull leans inward like it's tired of floating. Its sails hang limp in the wind. You wonder briefly if it's seaworthy. Then you remember that question doesn't matter. It's not your ship. It's your fate. There's a roll call. Names are shouted, mispronounced, ignored. Men jostle for position, afraid of being left behind and afraid of being chosen. You watch the officers bark orders at one another while servants load crates marked company property onto the deck. You notice that none of the gentlemen are carrying their own things. That won't change. You're handed a ration pouch and a rough shove toward the gangplank. No ceremony, no prayer, no farewell to the homeland, just a line of men, trudging up into a wooden box that will soon be your entire world. You hear one man murmur that it's only 6 weeks to Virginia. Another says 8. Another shrugs and mutters, "If the wind holds." You stop asking questions. You keep walking. At the top of the gangplank, you pause for just a moment. You look back at the grey sky over England, the place that raised you, ignored you, and finally discarded you. You think of everything you hated about it, and then you think of everything you'll miss. It's a short list, but it hits harder than expected. Then someone behind you snaps, "Move along," and you do. The deck creaks under your boots. The ropes groan. The crew shouts at each other in accents you can barely understand. A gull circles overhead, laughing maybe. You find a space near the railing, set down your bundle, and wait. For the others to board. For the ship to launch. For your life to become something different. If not better, then at least unrecognisable. And when the anchor is finally hauled and the sails lurch into the wind, you don't cheer. No one does. You just grip the railing and stare at the horizon, where England shrinks into the mist and the new world waits, unseen, unknown, and already regrettable. The ocean doesn't care about your dreams. It doesn't care that you're poor, desperate, or convinced there's treasure waiting for you on the other side. The ocean is a long, slow punishment. Yet the ship creaks constantly under your feet, a tired, sagging carcass of tarred wood and fraying rope. It rocks with the rhythm of something dying slowly, and you, unfortunately, are along for the ride. The wind is either too strong or not there at all. When it's strong, the ship tilts and groans like it's reconsidering the entire journey. When it's calm, the sails hang limp and the crew mutters about dead men's luck. You haven't seen land in weeks, and you've stopped looking for it. You're not even sure it's real anymore. Below deck, the air is thick and foul. You sleep in shifts, if at all. The hammocks sway with the tide, or snap from the ceiling if the knots weren't tied right. The man beside you coughs through the night, and you're fairly certain he's the one who spat something red into the corner. The corner now smells like rotting meat. The captain has forbidden spitting below deck, but no one listens. It's not defiance, just exhaustion. The rules feel like a joke when the ship itself feels like a floating coffin. Everyone stinks. Everyone snores. Someone is always moaning. No one has bathed since Portsmouth, and at this point, it would be more efficient to burn the clothes than wash them. The food is generous in quantity, if you count worms as garnish. You're served hardtack, a brick masquerading as bread, with the occasional bonus of maggots squirming inside. You quickly learn that this means it's at least not too dry. Salt pork arrives in chunks the colour of despair, gelatinous and riddled with fat so old it has the consistency of candle wax. Sometimes it's too salty to eat. Sometimes it isn't salty enough. and smells like a corpse that went for a swim. Either way, you eat it. Hunger does that. The barrels are coated with grease and brine and black mould that may once have been part of the original pig. You don't ask questions. You swallow and hope. There is beer technically, though calling it that feels charitable. It's flat, warm, and tastes like someone tried to boil feet in it. The water is worse. Stored in wooden casks, it begins to ferment after a few days. By week 2, it smells like piss and iron. You drink it anyway, plugging your nose and trying to ignore the grit between your teeth. Some men add vinegar or mix it with beer to hide the taste. Others pretend they're not thirsty until they pass out from dehydration. You try both strategies and find neither particularly effective. Time becomes meaningless. The days blur together in a haze of sweat, rot, and waiting. There's no scenery, just endless grey-blue water and the occasional seagull that makes everyone briefly consider eating it raw. The sun scorches your skin during the day and the wind chills your bones at night. There are no blankets. The rats keep you company, at least. They skitter across your chest while you try to sleep. Bold little monsters, fat from the same salt pork you gagged down at supper. One of them bites your toe. You curse, then apologise, because the rat looks healthier than you. Men begin to disappear. First, it's the old ones, those whose lungs wheeze and rattle like bellows in a forge. Then it's the weak. One day you wake up, and the man across from you is stiff, his eyes wide open, mouth agape like he saw something awful in his final moments. You doubt he did. More likely, he just stopped. A quiet, anticlimactic end. The crew wraps him in canvas and tosses him overboard without ceremony. Another man dies 2 days later. This time no one reacts. You're almost grateful. There's more room now. Slightly less breathing to do through your shirt. Disease spreads faster than rumour. Scabs bloom across your arms. Your gums ache. Your teeth feel loose, and the coppery taste in your mouth is becoming familiar. One man's jaw swells to the size of a melon and leaks pus when he tries to chew. He stops eating, then breathing, then moving all together. You suspect scurvy, or maybe God just gave up on him early. Either way, he's gone. Another splash over the side, another empty hammock. You're not sure if you envy him or fear you'll follow him. Maybe both. Some men try to entertain themselves. They carve dice from bone or play cards with bent, greasy decks that stick together in the humidity. Others gamble their rations. A few just mutter to themselves and stare into space. One man sings hymns until someone punches him in the throat. You don't blame them. You've grown to hate cheerfulness. It feels like an insult to your suffering. You sit in silence most of the time, counting the creaks in the ship or imagining the meal you'll never eat. Roast lamb, warm bread, cider without sediment. The fantasy is so vivid, it makes you cry a little. You wipe your eyes and pretend it's sweat. The officers remain separate. They have wine and private cabins and write pompous journal entries about God's providence and fortitude of spirit, while the rest of you poop in buckets and die in clusters. You hear one of them say the voyage is going well. You briefly consider throwing him overboard. Instead, you go back to gnawing on the same strip of salted cartilage you've been carrying around for 3 days. It tastes like nothing now. That's probably for the best. Eventually you catch sight of land. Not the golden fields you imagined, just a smudge on the horizon that looks suspiciously like mould. Still, it means the end of this chapter. You crawl up to the deck for your first breath of non-rotting air in weeks. It smells like trees, wet soil, and unfamiliar rot. You're not sure it's better, but it is different. That's enough. The captain orders the sails trimmed and the anchors lowered. You prepare to disembark, your legs shaking, your mouth full of sores, your stomach a gurgling hollow drum. You've survived the voyage. Congratulations. You are now perfectly qualified to die on land. You don't step onto solid land so much as you sink into it. The moment your boots touch the shore, the ground tries to eat them. It's not the golden frontier they promised in the pamphlet. It's not even land, really. Just mud with ambitions. The trees crowd together like they're plotting something. The air is wet and clings to your skin like a fever. Every breath tastes of mould and standing water. You've been told this is Virginia. You're starting to wonder if you misunderstood and accidentally signed up for purgatory. The first thing you notice, beyond the stench of rot and mildew, is the sound. Not the hopeful chirping of birds or the noble rush of wind through the forest. No, this is the sound of insects, constant, aggressive, shrill. The mosquitoes arrive before the crates are even unloaded. They descend on you like you owe them something, which, as it turns out, you do. Blood. They buzz around your ears, your neck, your eyes. They bite through cloth. One gets you just beneath the eye. It swells immediately, and someone laughs. You would glare at them, but you're too busy slapping your own face. You're ordered to start unloading supplies. There aren't many. A few barrels of spoiled meal, some rusting tools, and several crates filled with beads and mirrors. Gifts for the locals, apparently, because nothing says diplomacy like cheap glass. The officers bark orders from beneath their canopies, already complaining about the heat. One of them refuses to walk through the mud and has to be carried to shore. The man carrying him slips, and they both end up covered in swamp water. No one helps. You're too busy trying not to vomit from the smell. The goal is to build a fort. Not because of any immediate threat, you haven't even seen a native yet, but because the leadership insists it's necessary. Defense, they say, security. You suspect they just need something to point at and call progress, so you chop trees with dull axes and dig trenches in soil that oozes back into place the moment you stop. The logs are heavy, the sun is merciless, and your shirt is soaked through within minutes. The insects don't stop. If anything, they're encouraged by your efforts. One man swears he saw a mosquito land, lay eggs, and die of old age, all in the time it took him to blink. The fort, such as it is a wooden box built in a swamp. It leans, it leaks, it smells like the inside of a dead pig. The palisade walls are too short, the gate doesn't close properly, and the entire structure is sinking by the hour. Still, the officers declare it a triumph, a shining symbol of English industry. You suspect they just like having something between them and the wilderness, even if that something is held together by spit and wishful thinking. There is no fresh water. The river you're camped beside looks clean until you get close enough to smell it. Brackish, tidal. It rises and falls with the sea and carries every dead thing it touches. You drink from it anyway, because there's nothing else. A few men dig wells, but the water they find is only marginally less foul. Within days, the latrine trench has overflowed. You try to drink upstream. Everyone else has the same idea. You give up and accept the dysentery as inevitable. Food is even worse. There's no hunting party, no farming initiative, no plan beyond hope someone finds something edible. The officers talk about planting corn, but no one brought seeds. One man shoots a bird and is hailed as a hero. He shares it with 4 others, and they each get a bite the size of a coin. You try fishing, but the water yields only slimy, finger-sized things with too many bones and not enough meat. You eat them anyway. Then you vomit. Then you eat again. Some men refuse to work. They're gentlemen, apparently, which means they brought ruffled collars and no survival skills. One spends a full day sketching the trees. Another collapses from heat exhaustion after trying to direct labour from atop a stump. The rest of you mutter curses under your breath and do twice the work. Resentment blooms faster than the swamp mould on your boots. You stop asking names. It's easier that way. The wildlife is not subtle. You hear snakes in the underbrush, though you rarely see them. One man claims he found a copperhead in his boot. Another is bitten while squatting behind a tree. He swells up like a sausage and dies before anyone can remember his name. There are wolves too, though they stay back, for now. At night, you hear them howling beyond the trees and you pray they stay afraid of fire. Sleep offers no relief. The tents are canvas scraps strung between poles. They flap in the wind, drip in the rain, and do nothing to keep out the bugs. The ground beneath you is always damp. Your back aches, your feet itch. You dream of England, of bread, of dry socks. Then you wake up and remember you're here, again, still. After a few days, a group of locals approaches. Powhatan, you think? You've been warned about them. You're told they're savages, cunning, treacherous, violent. They arrive carrying food, corn mostly, some smoked fish. They gesture, smile cautiously. You give them beads and hatchets, and pretend not to notice the look in their eyes, that quiet calculation. They know what you don't, that you're already dying, that the fort won't hold, that the land is winning. The officers declare the exchange a diplomatic victory. They write letters home about peaceful contact and mutual respect. They fail to mention that you were starving, that the gifts you gave were your last trade goods, that without help, you'd be digging into tree bark by the week's end. Still, it's something. You eat the corn like it's a gift from heaven. Then you get diarrhea anyway. The heat doesn't break, the rain doesn't stop. The mud gets deeper, the air thicker, the stench more familiar. The fort sags. A wall collapses and is rebuilt with less care. A man dies from heat stroke, and the body is left out overnight because no one wants to dig another hole. When it's gone in the morning, no one asks questions. You stop noticing the smell. This was supposed to be a triumph, a bold step into a new world. You were going to build a home, maybe a future. Instead, you've built a damp wooden box in a rotting swamp, and the only thing it protects you from is hope. You sit by the fire, swatting mosquitoes, chewing gritty cornmeal, and watching the trees. They're still there, still waiting. You don't know what for, but you're starting to suspect it's not you. It's your corpse. You were told there would be food. Maybe not English food. No pies, no roasts, nothing with butter, but something. Wild game, fish, fruit hanging off trees like nature's welcome basket. What you got instead was sand, not figurative sand, actual useless, bone-dry sand pretending to be soil. It crunches when you walk on it. It sucks the moisture from your skin. You could plant dreams in this dirt and they'd come up dead. And yet, this is where you're expected to grow your future. You don't even have seeds. No one thought to bring any. The men in charge brought armour and lace and musical instruments. They did not bring wheat. You try anyway. Someone finds a few loose kernels of corn left over from trading with the Powhatan and sticks them in the ground, like prayer beads. A few others carve sticks into ploughs and start scratching trenches through the dust. It's all theatre, nothing takes root. The sun beats down like a punishment. When it rains, it floods. When it doesn't, everything cracks and curls. The insects eat faster than anything grows. One of the officers declares the land uncooperative, as if it's a servant refusing orders. He never dirties his hands. The food stores brought from England last about a week before they're declared inedible. The salted meat has turned gelatinous and smells like wet parchment. The flour is alive, not metaphorically. It writhes when you open the sacks. You sift out the worms at first, then stop bothering. They're easier to swallow than the bread. Most meals are made of whatever's left. Spoiled grain boiled into paste. Thin stew flavoured with whatever root someone tripped over that day. The occasional scrap of jerky that's more leather than beef. You chew with your molars and pretend not to notice the hair. Or the mould. Every day you wake up hungry. Not the kind of hungry that makes you grumble and glance at the pantry. The kind of hungry that lives in your bones. That replaces your blood with a slow gnawing ache. Your thoughts get fuzzy. Your legs feel hollow. You start forgetting words, names, where you put your belt. You can't focus long enough to hold a shovel. The world gets slower, meaner, louder. A man sneezes, and you want to kill him, just for having the energy. Some men fish. They stand by the brackish river for hours, lines dangling, watching the sun rise and set like it's mocking them. They catch almost nothing. A few small eels, some strange bony things with translucent skin and bulging eyes. No one knows if they're safe to eat. You eat them anyway. You boil them into mush and strain the bones through your teeth. The first time you vomit, you blame your weak stomach. The third time, you stop pretending. Hunting is worse. There is game in the woods, theoretically. Deer, rabbits, birds. But the animals are smart enough to stay far from the smell of human despair. The one man, with a functioning musket, manages to shoot a squirrel. He brings it back like a trophy. 12 men fight over it. They end up dividing it into thimble-sized portions. Someone eats the tail and claims it tasted fine. You don't believe him, but you're still jealous. Foraging becomes the colony's new religion. Every morning, groups are sent out to scour the nearby woods for anything green that doesn't immediately smell like death. You come back with mushrooms, most of which you can't identify. Some taste bitter, some taste like dirt, some taste like nothing at all, and then make your vision blur and your stomach fold inside itself. 3 men die after eating a cluster of pale white fungi they swore looked safe enough. You make a note not to trust anyone's instincts ever again. Eventually, you eat the bark off trees. You peel it back and chew the inner layer, which tastes like damp linen and does almost nothing to fill you. Someone boils leather, old shoes, belts, satchels. You sit in a circle and share strips of it like jerky. You chew until your jaw aches, and when you finally swallow, you feel it settle in your gut like regret. You joke about eating the gloves next. It's not a joke. The Powhatan occasionally bring food, but the trades grow tense. They know what you are now, desperate, clumsy, greedy. You offer trinkets, beads, mirrors, metal tools. They give less each time. Corn, a little fish, a handful of squash. The officers smile and nod and call it diplomacy. You can see it in the natives' eyes. They're already planning for the day they stop sharing. One morning, they don't come at all. You don't blame them. Hunger begins to change the way you see things. You start measuring people by how much meat is on their bones. Not out loud, not yet, but the thought is there, waiting, growing alongside the hunger. You eye the fatter settlers when they walk past. You wonder if human meat tastes different depending on diet. You hate yourself for thinking it. You think it again anyway. The officers still eat better than the rest. They have private stores, wine, salted meats packed in sealed barrels. One of them eats a preserved pear in front of you. Juice runs down his chin. You imagine driving your spoon into his eye socket. Instead, you watch and smile and wonder what his thigh would taste like. Probably stringy. As summer fades, your bones start showing. Your pants hang loose. Your belt doesn't fit. Men walk like ghosts, swaying, muttering to themselves, digging holes for no reason. One man refuses to leave his tent. When someone checks on him, they find him gnawing on his own boot. He doesn't stop when they enter. He doesn't stop when they shout. Eventually, he just stops. By the time autumn arrives, you're not just hungry. You are hunger. You think about food more than sleep, more than safety, more than God. You pray, but your stomach answers louder. Your body is devouring itself. Your muscles waste. Your mind blurs. You lose track of the days. You dream of bread, of broth, of roasted meat. Not lavish feasts, just something warm, something real. You wake up drooling into your shirt, and it takes you a moment to remember where you are. Virginia, a land of opportunity, a promised Eden where you get to starve like a gentleman. When you pictured dying in Virginia, you probably imagined something more dramatic. A clash with warriors in feathers and war paint maybe. A final stand on some wooden palisade, bloodied but noble. Something worthy of a letter home. You didn't imagine it would be the water. You didn't imagine you'd die from the simple, stupid act of drinking. But here you are, kneeling beside the river, scooping brackish liquid into a cracked cup, and hoping this time your stomach won't turn against you. It will. It always does. The river is not fresh, you know this. Everyone knows this. It's tidal, a mingling of seawater, runoff, rot, and whatever leaches out of the pit latrines uphill. It rises and falls like a lazy breath, stirring up mud, waste, dead fish, and sometimes actual dead people. The current carries everything you don't want in your body directly to your lips. But it's the only water you've got. The wells dug nearby are no better. Shallow holes filled with silty runoff and the occasional drowned rodent. The water smells faintly of iron and strongly of despair, but your body doesn't care about the scent. It just wants moisture. The first symptoms are subtle. A headache, a bitter taste in your mouth. You think maybe it's hunger again. Then comes the cramping. Tight, insistent, like something inside you is twisting itself into knots. Next is the sweating, the fever, the shakes. You cling to your bunk or the nearest patch of ground and ride it out, teeth chattering while your stomach attempts to evict itself. Your skin goes cold and clammy. You start to hallucinate. You see England again. You see your mother's face. You see her turning away. Some men recover, others don't. They begin to deflate, shrinking into their clothes, eyes sunken, voices reduced to whispers. Their bodies exude a sour, syrupy stench. One man soils himself so often, no one bothers to move him anymore. Another walks into the woods and doesn't come back. Someone finds him curled around a tree root, mouth still open. You bury him in a shallow grave, but it floods by morning, and he floats halfway out again. You decide that's good enough. Malaria comes next, or maybe it's already here. You're not sure. The doctors, if you can call them that, have no clue what's going on. They bleed people for fevers, lace wounds with soot, and prescribe purging for everything. One recommends tobacco smoke blown into the rectum. You're not joking, you wish you were. No one volunteers to test that particular method. The mosquito bites cover every inch of your skin. At first, they were just annoying. Now they're swollen, infected, oozing pus. You scratch until you bleed. Then you scratch some more. Eventually, you stop bothering. You're already a patchwork of sores. The fevers roll in waves. One day, you're drenched in sweat, raving nonsense about being back home. The next, you're shivering so hard your teeth crack. You try to work, to build, to dig, but your limbs are rubber and your mind is fog. The officers accuse you of malingering. They say it's a lack of discipline. You want to explain that your organs are dissolving, but your mouth is full of ulcers and your tongue is too dry to move. You just nod and collapse again. Salt poisoning sets in quietly. You didn't know it was possible to drink too much water until you spent a week consuming nothing but what the river offered. The salinity builds up in your body, and your kidneys, already overworked from all the other poisons, begin to fail. Your joints ache, your eyes swell, your urine turns dark brown, then stops entirely. You keep drinking because your throat burns and your lips have split open. But the more you drink, the worse it gets. Eventually, you stop sweating altogether. The inside of your mouth feels like it's been lined with sandpaper. When you die full of water, and somehow still thirsty. Everyone smells. You no longer notice your own odour, but others are impossible to ignore. Some men ooze, some leak, some rot. The sores never close. The insects find their way into everything. Bedding, clothing, wounds. You swat them in your sleep, wake to find blood under your nails, and fresh bites blooming along your arms. The scabs tear when you scratch. They reopen when you move. You stop healing. You become a collection of broken things held together by habit and threadbare linen. Dysentery is the worst. You think it can't get worse, but it always does. It begins with a gurgle, a polite warning. Then a cramp so sharp it doubles you over. Then the rushing, panicked shuffle to the pit you now call the latrine. If you're lucky, you make it in time. If you're not, you spend the rest of the day sitting in wet trousers, too weak to clean yourself. Eventually, you stop making it. You lose track of how many times a day your body tries to empty itself. There's nothing left but bile and blood, and still it keeps trying. You start to hate your own intestines. You start to envy the dead. Cleanliness is impossible. Water is tainted, soap is a rumour, and rags are already being reused in ways best not described. You try to rinse yourself in the river once, just to feel less filthy. You come out feeling worse. A film clings to your skin for hours, a slick, greasy coating that refuses to wash away. Someone else tried the same thing and developed boils along their spine. They screamed through the night, then went silent. You don't ask what happened. The officers, of course, are doing slightly better. They drink from private casks. They sleep in tents with raised floors and air holes. One even has wine. He sips it at night, thoughtfully, like he's composing a letter to the king. You want to throttle him, but you don't have the strength. And besides, he'll die too, probably slower. Maybe not this month. But this place doesn't discriminate forever. Eventually, you stop reacting to the new symptoms. Someone vomits blood? Old news. Someone else finds worms in their stool? Not even worth comment. You've seen it all. You've smelled it all. You've been it all. This is your new normal. Sweating, shaking, bleeding, shitting, and always, always thirsting. The real miracle is that anyone survives at all. That the human body, even half destroyed and betrayed by every system it has, keeps going. Keeps crawling toward the next handful of rotten corn, the next putrid cup of water, the next night spent swatting bugs and dreaming of soap. You lie on your back, staring at the stars, wondering if they're even real. You think you see your breath, but it's just the mist off the swamp. You think about dying, but there's still a little pain left in you. And that means something is still working. Not well, but working. You could endure the hunger. You could endure the heat, the insects, the festering sores, and the endless parade of illnesses. What's harder to endure is the fact that the people in charge, the ones meant to lead you, protect you, plan for your survival, are a collection of posturing, powdered incompetents who brought swords instead of shovels, and seemed genuinely confused that Virginia didn't roll out a red carpet. They were born with names that sound like furniture: Wingfield, Newport, Percy, and all of them wear lace like it means something. To them, it does. To the rest of you, it means they're less likely to do anything useful and more likely to die dramatically in a plume of perfume and pride. Most of them are gentlemen. That's not a compliment. It means they don't work. Not because they're lazy, though many are, but because they believe work is beneath them. They grew up being told that lifting things was for peasants, that dirt under your nails was a moral failure, and that God put other people on earth to sweat in their place. So now they stand around with their arms crossed, giving vague orders and frowning at your blisters. One of them tried to direct fort construction while holding a silver goblet and wearing velvet breeches. He collapsed from heat stroke 20 minutes in. When he woke up, he accused someone of sabotage. The other half of your leaders are too busy arguing with each other to accomplish anything. Power in the colony shifts hourly, depending on who's yelling loudest or who still has the strength to stand. There's a council technically, but it functions more like a drunken knife fight. One man gets voted out, another gets voted in, then the first man stabs the third one in the leg with a fork and calls it policy. You watch them bicker over maps, rations, and the proper placement of outhouses, while your fellow settlers collapse from dysentery in the background. If irony still had meaning, it would laugh itself sick. Captain Newport sails off whenever things get difficult, claiming it's for resupply. You suspect it's just to get away from the smell. When he returns, he brings more gentlemen and a few barrels of gunpowder, but no food, no tools, and no clear plan. He delivers speeches about English destiny and divine providence, then disappears into his private tent and refuses to answer questions. His contribution to daily survival is mostly ceremonial. He shows up, he salutes, he vanishes. If he has a strategy, it's keeping just enough distance that when everything falls apart, he can pretend he wasn't involved. There are rules, but they change constantly. One day, you're ordered to dig a new well. The next, you're told it's a security risk and filled in with logs. You're told to ration food, then punished for not working hard enough. You're told to obey the council, then warned the council has been dissolved and replaced by emergency authority. You try to keep your head down, but even that's suspicious. One officer accuses you of plotting a mutiny because you didn't cheer loudly enough during the morning prayer. You were chewing bark at the time. You thought that would be obvious. Punishments are handed out with the same logic as weather patterns. Arbitrary, cruel, and inevitable. A man steals a biscuit and is tied to a post in the sun until he passes out. Another man falls asleep during guard duty and is nearly hanged. One of the officers misplaces his satchel and has 3 labourers flogged on the assumption that one of them must have taken it. He later finds it under his own cot. No apology is given. No one expects one. There's one man who tries, Captain John Smith. You've heard of him, even if you've never spoken to him directly. He works, at least, builds, organises, shouts at the gentleman to pick up a spade or get out of the way. For this, they hate him. He's low-born, too direct, too practical. He believes food should go to those who earn it. Radical stuff. He's arrested more than once. One time, they nearly hang him, until they realise he's the only one who knows how to dig a trench without causing a cave-in. That buys him a few more weeks of relevance. Smith's motto, "He who does not work shall not eat," spreads quickly. You like it, it makes sense, which is why it doesn't last. The moment he's injured, the gentlemen go right back to sipping watered wine and watching you die from under their parasols. They argue about rank while you argue with your intestines. They debate protocol while you debate which route won't poison you. They hold meetings while you hold your dying friend's hand and try to remember what it felt like to have hope. Supplies run low. Decisions must be made. The council gathers and issues decrees. No stealing, no hoarding, no trading without approval. They enforce these with threats and eventually executions. One man is hanged for taking an extra handful of cornmeal. Another is tied to a tree and left for 2 days after refusing to share his boots. You hear that someone was executed for disrespecting the chain of command. You suspect it just means he made eye contact with the wrong person. As winter approaches, the chaos deepens. The officers bicker over who gets the last good shelter, the last barrel of pickled something, the last few matches. They draft letters to send back to England, each blaming the others for the colony's failure. You've seen them writing, long angry scrolls filled with flowery phrases about betrayal and honour. You wonder if they mention you at all. The labourers, the sick, the dying. Probably not. It wouldn't fit the narrative. You learn to tune them out. You stop expecting sense from above. When an officer gives you an order, you nod and wait for him to forget it. When they announce a new rationing schedule, you smile bitterly and eat whatever you've already hidden. You've stopped pretending this is a colony. It's a slow-motion collapse run by idiots in embroidered doublets who think shouting louder makes them right. One day, you see 2 of the gentlemen duelling. Actual swords, actual flourishes, full-on theatrical absurdity in the middle of a starving, diseased swamp. You're not sure what they're fighting over. Land, honour, someone's missing hat. It doesn't matter. You watch one of them slip in the mud and break his arm. The other declares himself victorious. You go back to digging latrines and trying not to vomit. This is leadership in Jamestown. Swords and speeches, finesse without function, orders without logic. And through it all, the only consistent message is clear. No one's coming to save you, least of all the men in charge. At first, it's surprisingly cordial. You're starving, diseased, and rapidly decaying, but when the Powhatan show up, they don't immediately kill you. They bring food, ears of corn, smoked fish, gourds you don't recognise but eat anyway. In return, you give them what little you have that isn't covered in mildew. Beads, copper trinkets, cheap hatchets, fragments of broken mirrors. You smile, nod, gesture in ways that hopefully don't mean threat in their language. Somehow, it works. You eat for a night and don't die. It feels like a miracle. The Powhatan are curious, cautious, and clearly smarter than you expected. You were told they'd be savages. But the ones you meet speak with confidence, observe carefully, and show absolutely no fear of your blunderbuss or your idiotic thought. You suspect they understand more English than they let on. You're almost certain they're laughing at you when your ambassador offers them a rusted pair of scissors. Like it's a royal gift. They accept it anyway, because pity, it turns out, is still useful. For a time, there's a rhythm. They come, you trade, they leave. It isn't friendship exactly, more like cautious tolerance. You're a curiosity, not a threat. And in those early months, they're probably just waiting to see if you'll die off without their help. A few officers write about the natives in glowing terms, calling them noble, peaceful, even generous. It's all very poetic, very civilized. Then you start demanding more. It begins subtly. One trade delegation returns with less corn than usual. Someone higher up declares this unacceptable. You're English after all. You have a charter, a flag, God on your side. The fact that you're currently half naked and defecating blood into a trench doesn't seem to dampen the colonial ego. So instead of offering more, you start offering less. Fewer beads, fewer goods, more attitude. The Powhatan are not impressed. When trade slows, desperation fills the gap. You don't ask for food, you expect it. You start visiting villages without invitation, insisting they provide grain. When they don't, you take it. The logic is simple. They have food. You need food. Therefore, it must be yours. This doesn't go over well. One man steals a basket of dried squash and gets a spear through the shoulder. He survives barely, and when he limps back to the fort, the officers declare it an act of aggression. They ignore the fact that he was literally holding stolen goods at the time. Retaliation follows, because of course it does. A patrol sets fire to a village on the edge of Powhatan territory. A preemptive strike, according to the report. Although no one's entirely sure what was being preempted. You stand on the edge of the forest and watch smoke rise into the sky. You tell yourself it was strategic. You tell yourself they had it coming. What you don't say aloud is that there were children in that village. You saw their footprints in the mud. After that, everything changes. The visits stop. The forest goes quiet. No more gifts. No more corn. You go days without seeing another soul outside the fort, and when you do, it's fleeting. Movement in the trees, too fast to track. The hunters return empty-handed. The foraging parties are watched, but not approached. You realise you're now surrounded, not just by wilderness, but by eyes. Fear sets in quickly. The officers respond with bravado. They talk of strength, discipline, deterrence. They send more men into the woods, this time with orders to inspire respect. What they inspire instead is a skirmish that leaves 3 colonists dead and 2 more injured. The survivors crawl back through the brush, bloodied and stunned. Their muskets unloaded. You don't know if they were ambushed or if they fired first. It doesn't matter. The peace, such as it was, is over. Paranoia takes hold inside the fort. Every sound in the trees is a scout. Every flicker of movement is a warrior with a bow. You hear someone whisper that they're poisoning the water. Another claims they're setting traps at night. You don't know what's true anymore. You just know that no one is sleeping well, and everyone's hand stays near a weapon, no matter what they're doing. Food runs low again. Without trade, your supplies dwindle to nothing. The fish won't bite, the soil won't grow, and the game is long gone. You suspect the Powhatan are deliberately driving it away, making sure you stay hungry. It's not a war of arrows, it's a siege of silence. And it's working. You eat boiled leather, roots, moss scraped from logs. One man eats a candle, another starts chewing charcoal. No one laughs. You're too weak for humour now. The officers naturally begin drafting new strategies. Some suggest diplomacy, others suggest force. Neither option leads to action. One proposal involves kidnapping the chief's daughter to ensure cooperation. It's met with polite nods and 0 volunteers. You're not sure what's worse, that someone thought of it or that it wasn't immediately dismissed. A few brave souls attempt to sneak into nearby villages to barter for food in secret. Some return with corn, some don't return at all. One man comes back with his hand missing and a note tied around his neck in unfamiliar script. No one knows what it says. No one wants to. Eventually, the Powhatan return, not to trade, but to surround you. Not openly. They never attack outright. They don't have to. They just make sure you see them, standing in the trees, watching, counting. You catch glimpses of movement along the ridgeline, a flicker of face paint, a glint of sunlight on a spearhead. You raise the alarm, but nothing happens. You shoot into the brush, and nothing answers. It's not a battle, it's a message. The message is clear. You're not welcome. You're not safe. You're not in control. The fort becomes a coffin, not by design, but by inertia. No one leaves. No one returns. The gates stay closed except for waste disposal and the occasional suicide. Even those have started to slow. Not because people aren't desperate, but because they're too tired to bother. You've gone from settlers to prisoners. The forest is the wall. The Powhatan are the guards. And starvation is the executioner. No more diplomacy. No more exchange. No more illusions. Your only option now is to die politely and hope someone remembers your name. Spoiler, they won't. Winter doesn't arrive so much as settle in. Heavy, grey, and cruel. It doesn't announce itself with snowdrifts or festive frost. It just gets cold. Relentlessly. Bone-deep cold. Your breath fogs in front of your face. The mud turns to frozen crust. The wind finds every hole in the fort's patchwork walls and screams through them like a warning. Fires burn low because the wood is wet. Blankets are thin and shared. You start wearing the same coat for weeks, even when you sleep. It smells like smoke, mildew, and the faint, sour tang of fear. By now, you're already hungry. You've been hungry for months. But winter sharpens it, freezes it into something constant, something that hums inside your ribs. The little scraps you were surviving on, fish guts, roots, leftover cornmeal you scraped from the bottom of a barrel, are gone. There's nothing left to forage. The trees are bare. The ground is hard. The rivers are sluggish and bitter. And the forest, once filled with the distant hum of life, has gone silent. The rats come out first. You hear them in the night, scrabbling behind crates, gnawing at the same wood you're burning for heat. You set traps. Some you catch, others catch you. A man loses 2 fingers to a rat bite that festers almost immediately. You eat the rats anyway. Skin them, boil them, chew the stringy meat like it's venison. You argue over who gets the bones. Someone tries roasting one whole, and the smell makes half the room cry. After the rats come the dogs, then the cats, then anything that once had a pulse. A crow is shot and shared among 7 men. A squirrel is boiled into a greasy broth and called a feast. Leather becomes food. You slice belts into strips and soak them in water until they're soft enough to chew. Boots, gloves, scraps of harness, all of it is edible technically. One man tries to eat his own glove without cooking it and nearly chokes. Another boils the cover of a Bible and swears it was the best thing he's tasted in weeks. No one questions the blasphemy. You begin to count the days by the deaths. Not officially, no one is recording names anymore, but informally, by word of mouth. Today we lost a tailor, the boy from the lower tent, that man who used to sing. You forget faces before you forget names. You forget names before you forget they were ever there. There's no time to mourn. There's no energy. You dig shallow graves until the ground is too frozen to dig. After that, you stop digging. The bodies pile up, not all at once, but slowly, constantly. A man goes to sleep near the fire and doesn't wake up. Another walks into the woods and lies down in the snow. You step over someone you spoke to the day before, curled against the wall, mouth open, eyes still wide. No one moves him, not out of cruelty, just inertia. You learn to step carefully. Then someone eats the dead. You don't know who does it first, you just hear about it. A whisper, a rumour, passed between trembling mouths. At first it's dismissed, horror stories, fevered dreams. But then someone finds bones, stripped clean, burned black at the ends. You tell yourself it was animals. You tell yourself it was a mistake. Then it happens again and again, until it's not a rumour anymore. It's a routine. The first time you taste it, it's because you're offered. A scrap of meat, grey and oily, passed around the fire, like communion. No one says what it is. No one has to. You chew. It's soft, strange, indistinct. You swallow. You feel the heat in your stomach. And for the first time in days, you feel something close to full. You say nothing. Neither does anyone else. You try to rationalise it. The man was already dead. He didn't suffer. He would have wanted to help. Or maybe he wouldn't have. But that doesn't matter now. You convince yourself this is survival, not murder. You tell yourself you'll stop when food returns. But food isn't coming. You know that now. This isn't temporary. This is life. Eventually someone doesn't wait for death. He's caught carving his wife, what's left of her. He says she died first. No one asks how long ago. No one wants to know. The leadership puts him on trial, such as it is. They sentence him to death for murder. You don't know if they hang him for justice or to make an example. Either way, the message is clear. Die quietly or die loudly. Just make sure you're not in anyone's way when you do. Some men leave the fort hoping to find food in the woods. None come back. You suspect they were either killed by natives or frozen in place, too weak to return. Sometimes you think you hear screaming in the forest. Sometimes you think you imagined it. Sometimes you hope you did. The trees feel closer now, like they're watching, like they're waiting for you to finally collapse so they can grow over you in peace. There's no schedule anymore. No work assignments, no rationing, no sermons. The fort is quiet, save for the wheezing coughs and the occasional moan. Fires burn low. Conversations are whispers. You barely speak at all. Your tongue feels thick. Your lips crack. Your stomach no longer growls. It just aches. Constant, dull, heavy. You look down at your hands and realise you can see the bones through the skin. Somewhere in this mess someone writes a letter. Maybe it's a journal entry. Maybe it's for England. It talks about endurance, about the colonists' brave struggle. It does not mention the cannibalism. It does not mention the rats. It does not mention the way you looked at the man beside you and wondered how long it would take before you were eating him, or he was eating you. History will tidy this up. It always does. By spring, only a few of you are left. Hollow-eyed, sunken, staggering things that barely resemble what you were. New ships arrive, filled with men who look at you like you're a ghost. You are, and worse, you're the lucky one. You survived the starving time, and you will spend the rest of your short diseased life remembering what that actually means. Hunger doesn't just empty the body, it rots the mind. It starts slow, missed words, lost thoughts, stares that go a little too long. Then it builds, restlessness, rage, men pacing in circles, whispering to themselves, snapping over nothing. You watch a man beat another with a spoon because he thought he heard him chewing too loudly. There's no justice system left, no rules, no due process. Just desperation disguised as righteousness. Every grievance becomes a death sentence waiting to happen. You see men talking to trees, laughing at walls. One strips off his clothes and runs into the woods screaming about bread. No one follows. Another spends 3 days sitting in the mud, rocking back and forth, refusing to eat or speak. When he finally stands, he walks into the river and disappears under the surface. Whether he meant to drown or was too weak to swim no longer matters. He's gone. Someone else takes his bed without comment. Paranoia spreads faster than disease. People start watching each other too closely. Every cough is suspicious. Every movement toward the food supply is scrutinized. You learn to hide whatever scraps you have. In your boots, under your shirt, behind the rotting beams of the fort's wall. If someone sees, they might smile and nod, or they might kill you in your sleep. There's no way to know anymore. Trust has died, and loyalty went with it. The officers try to assert control, but they're just as broken as the rest of you. They've lost too much weight, too much blood, too much authority. Their clothes still say power, fine wool, lace, polished boots. But their faces say fear. They sleep in shifts. They keep weapons within arm's reach at all times. One officer is found sharpening his sword in the dark, whispering the Lord's Prayer between gritted teeth. You don't ask questions, you keep your head down. You hope he's not looking for an excuse. Executions begin in earnest, not just for theft or desertion, but for disobedience, insolence, or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. One man is hanged for hoarding a handful of beans. Another is tied to a post and left in the cold for stealing firewood. One is accused of witchcraft, though no one can explain why. It's just something to blame. The man pleads innocence until his voice goes hoarse. He dies anyway. You bury him in the same frozen ditch as the rest. If you even bother to dig at all, some punishments are public. They say it's to maintain order. You suspect it's just to remind everyone who still holds a musket. You're called to gather in the courtyard to watch. A man kneels. The charge is read. Theft, betrayal, cowardice, treason. It changes with each execution. The sentence is the same. You stop feeling anything. You don't even flinch when the axe falls. The blood doesn't bother you anymore. What gets to you is the smell of it. The warm copper tang that makes your stomach growl before you remember why you should be ashamed. Whispers of mutiny begin to circulate. Not loud ones, no shouting. Just murmurs in corners, exchanged glances, fingers twitching near knives. There's talk of overthrowing the officers, dividing what little is left equally, abandoning the fort and fleeing into the woods. It all sounds noble at first, some last-ditch attempts at salvation. But no one knows where they'd go. No one knows how to survive out there either. You can't even make it a day inside the walls without bleeding from both ends. The rebellion dies before it begins, but not all of it. One night someone tries, you don't know who. You just wake to shouting, steel on steel, then a musket crack that echoes through the compound like thunder. When it's over, 2 men are dead, and 1 officer has a broken arm. No one admits to starting it. No one confesses. The next morning, the remaining leadership selects 3 suspects and executes them in a line. One of them was barely conscious. He had rags wrapped around his legs and couldn't stand on his own. They propped him up for the hanging. It takes a long time for him to stop twitching. After that, the executions become less about justice and more about stability. They don't need to prove guilt, only that someone needs to die to remind the rest of you what fear feels like. It works. The muttering stops. The glances stop. The spirit of rebellion, already weak, is finally starved out, like the rest of you. By now, you've learned that silence is the only safety. You speak when spoken to. You nod when ordered. You don't ask for help, and you don't offer it. You keep to your corner, your tin cup, your splintered bunk. If someone collapses next to you, you don't move. If someone doesn't wake up, you let someone else find them. You've built a little wall around yourself, not of wood, but of numbness. It's the only thing still standing in this place. The forest presses in. It's quieter now. The Powhatan don't show themselves. They don't need to. You are no longer a threat. You're barely alive. You're a cautionary tale in real time, and they're smart enough not to interfere. You look at the trees and wonder if they're laughing. One night, you wake to footsteps near your bed. You don't open your eyes, you pretend to sleep. You hear breathing. Something is being taken. Maybe a blanket, maybe the rat you trapped, Maybe just the last crust of food you'd hidden under your shirt. You let it happen. You don't want to fight anymore. You just want to get through one more night without being stabbed, hanged or eaten. There's no more leadership. Not really, just survivors. Just frightened, starving men with titles they no longer enforce. The social structure that sailed from England with so much pride has collapsed into a slurry of mud and blood. Everyone is equal now. Equally miserable, equally terrified, equally close to death. There's a grim democracy in that. You begin to wonder what you even are anymore. A settler, a prisoner, a beast. You can't remember the last time you saw your own reflection. You're not sure you'd recognize yourself if you did. Your hands look like they belong to someone older. Your voice is cracked and unfamiliar. Your thoughts, when they come, are dark and shallow. Sometimes you forget your own name, but still you wake up, you breathe, you chew whatever you can find, you listen to the moans of the dying, and you wonder, not for the first time, if you'll be next, and whether anyone would notice if you were. It starts in silence, not with a scream or a shout, but with a quiet absence. A man dies and his body is not buried, not right away. No one says anything, no one points it out, but you all notice. The ground is too hard, the shovel's too dull, the air too cold, so the body stays where it is, tucked into a corner of the fort under a blanket. Then it's moved, not to a grave, but to a shed. Just until morning, someone says. Just until we can find the strength. Morning comes and the body's gone. No one asks questions. You all saw the man who dragged it away. You all saw the stain it left behind. You all saw the man eating alone later that night. His mouth moving slowly, eyes glassy, face calm in a way that didn't fit. No one confronts him. There's nothing to say. You tell yourself maybe he buried it elsewhere. Maybe he had a reason. Maybe you're imagining things, but you're not. The body count keeps rising. There aren't enough hands to dig holes. The earth won't cooperate. The frost clings to everything, and the dead no longer smell like death. They smell like food. You don't want to think about it, but you do. At first, the thoughts come at night, when your belly is burning, and your brain feels soft from exhaustion. You imagine meals you'll never eat. Stews, roasts, pies. Then the food in your dreams begins to look familiar. You dream of ribs, of thighs, of faces. You wake up chewing nothing and tasting everything. One man is caught carving his wife. He's hunched over her, weeping and whispering something that no one tries to understand. The knife in his hand is shaking, but the cut is clean. He says she died in the night. He says he waited. He says he prayed. No one asks why he started with the thighs. The officers drag him outside and put him in stocks. They say he'll be tried for murder. He doesn't argue. He doesn't even cry. He just stares at the ground and mumbles her name like a prayer or a curse. Later, he disappears. No one announces his punishment. No one asks where he went. You want to believe he was telling the truth, that she was already gone, that his grief had snapped something inside him. It's easier that way. It's better than imagining he crossed that line out of convenience. But the truth doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what his actions unlocked in everyone else. The silence breaks. The rules dissolve. You all start to look differently at the dead. It becomes a routine, quiet and unspoken. A man dies and someone claims the body. No one asks for permission. No one calls it cannibalism. It's just what happens now. The meat is carved carefully, wrapped, boiled into soup. You stop asking what's in the pot. You stop looking too closely at what you're handed. You eat what you're given, and you say thank you, even when it tastes too rich, even when the texture is wrong, even when it reminds you of something you can't place and don't want to. The worst part isn't the act, it's the way it makes you feel. Stronger, warmer, more alert. You hate yourself for it, but it's true. After weeks of chewing leather and sucking bark, you finally feel alive. Your stomach stops screaming. Your limbs stop trembling. Your thoughts become sharp again. You can stand up without seeing stars. You can walk without needing to lean on a wall. You try to justify it, that it's already dead, that you didn't kill anyone, that this isn't murder, it's survival, but you know better. You're eating people, and you're glad for it. There are rules, unofficial ones. Don't eat the sick, their meat is tainted. Don't take a body unless it's cold. Don't eat anyone you spoke to that day. Don't eat children, no matter how hungry you are. That one especially gets repeated. Don't eat the children. Like it's a line that will somehow preserve your humanity. Like there's anything left to preserve. But rules bend. You see it happen. A man cradles the corpse of his brother and doesn't bury him. He waits until dark. You don't look, but you hear it. The sounds of knives scraping bone, the bubbling of the pot. The next morning he's smiling. Not a big smile, just a twitch at the corners of his mouth. He offers you a piece. You take it. You chew. You don't say thank you. After that, the line blurs completely. Someone finds a body and doesn't wait for nightfall. Another pretends not to notice when someone else falls while gathering firewood. You stop trying to separate the accident from the opportunity. You no longer care if they died naturally. You no longer care if someone helped. It's all the same in the end. And then come the dreams. Not of food, it's of faces, familiar ones. You dream of the man you shared a bunk with, now laid out on a table, his chest opened like a butcher's prize. You dream of eating your own hands. You wake up biting your fingers. You dream of chewing your tongue. You wake up bleeding from your mouth. You stop dreaming after a while. Your brain is too tired or too afraid. You don't talk about it. No one does. When reinforcements arrive in the spring and find the survivors gaunt and hollow-eyed, they ask what happened. You say nothing. You let the officers speak of hardship and God's test, of English endurance and noble perseverance. You say your prayers, you bow your head, and you don't mention the bones buried under the floorboards. You don't mention the smell that never left. You don't mention the faces you still see when you close your eyes. Some of the new men look at you with awe. They call you a survivor, a hero. You smile politely and look at the ground. You wonder what they'll do when the food runs out again. You wonder how long it will take before they start looking at each other the same way you did. You tell yourself you were just doing what it took to stay alive, that you're not a monster, that you were desperate, that you were starving, that you had no choice. You tell yourself this every night, over and over, like a prayer, but the taste is still in your mouth, and it never goes away. One day you hear the sound of sails, not the creaking of your own decaying fort, not the wind whistling through the broken palisade, but something distant, rhythmic, intentional, a whisper of canvas catching air. You think you're hallucinating. You've heard things before, bells that weren't ringing, footsteps that never arrived, but this sound keeps getting louder. Then someone on the lookout shouts, and suddenly the whole fort is moving like it hasn't in months. A ship is coming, an actual ship, with real sails and fresh wood and men who are still upright and speaking in full sentences. At first, you don't know how to feel. Joy isn't the right word. Neither is relief. What you feel is suspicion, that it might be a mirage, that it might be too late, that it might not even stop, that someone on board will take one look at the state of your so-called colony and keep right on sailing. But it does stop. The anchor drops, a boat rows ashore, and then there they are, the reinforcements, healthy, fed, wearing clean shirts and expressions of horror. They step onto the beach looking for the glorious outpost they read about in letters and pamphlets. Instead, they find you. You're crouched in the dirt, swatting flies off your face, clothes hanging from your body like rags on a fence post. You're not the welcome party they expected. You're not even fully human anymore, and their faces show it. They don't say anything at first, they just look. One of them gags from the smell. Another steps into something soft and sticky and refuses to look down. An officer tries to take control, barking orders and asking questions, but you can see his hands shaking. He's looking at the fort, at its crumbling walls, its collapsed roofs, the skeleton of a gate barely hanging from its hinges, and realizing there's nothing here to command. You want to say something, to welcome them, to explain. But your voice cracks in your throat, and all that comes out is a cough. You take them inside, or what's left of it. The new arrivals move through the space slowly, eyes wide, mouths tight. They see the black stains in the corners, the gnawed bones that weren't buried deep enough, the fires that never burned hot enough to cover what you did. They don't ask questions, they know. Maybe not the details, but the shape of it is clear. The air reeks of sickness and secrets. The walls whisper what no one wants to say aloud. You show them the few supplies you have left. A barrel with a rotting lid, a handful of dried roots. They bring crates filled with biscuits, dried beef, salted fish, and fresh water. You stare at the food like it's magic. Some men cry, others laugh. You try to restrain yourself, to eat slowly, to be civil. You fail. You eat like a beast. You chew until your jaw hurts, until your stomach clenches in confusion at being full. You eat until you're ashamed. The newcomers bring news of England, of the company, of more settlers coming soon. They speak as if this is still a functioning colony, not a haunted ruin squatting in the mud. They talk of rebuilding, of expanding, of a second chance. You listen politely and say nothing. You know they'll learn soon enough. This place doesn't reward hope, it devours it. They ask what happened, not directly. No one wants to say cannibalism out loud, but they circle around it. They ask about the dead, about the leadership, about the lack of graves. You give them numbers, dates, euphemisms. You say, lost to disease and perished in the winter. You say, we did what we had to do. You don't say, we ate them. You don't say, some of them screamed. You don't say, I felt better after. One man keeps asking questions. He's too young, too clean. Probably a clerk or some officer's son. He wants to write a report. You watch him jot things down while flies land on his parchment. You wonder what he'll write when he gets back. That you were brave, that you endured, that this place, despite its trials, remains a beacon of English tenacity. You wonder if he'll include the smell, the bones, the man in the corner who still mutters to himself and won't let anyone touch his boots. The newcomers start issuing orders. They say you'll clear out the rot, rebuild the walls, dig proper graves. It's all very organised, very professional. You nod along. You move slowly, stiffly, like your joints were replaced with rusted hinges. You do what they say, but your hands don't move the way they used to. Your strength isn't back. Your will isn't back. You're here, breathing, standing, but you're not really here. Not anymore. They ask for volunteers to lead scouting parties. You don't volunteer. You avoid eye contact. You stay close to the fire and pretend to be busy. You're not going back into those woods. You're not looking for anything. Let them find out what lives out there and what doesn't. At night, they hold prayers. They speak of renewal, of grace, of the Lord's mercy. You mouth the words but don't believe them. You've seen what mercy looks like here, and it's not divine. It's the moment when someone dies quietly instead of screaming. It's the moment when the stew doesn't taste like anything familiar. That's as close to mercy as Virginia gets. Some of the newcomers try to be friendly. They offer you clean clothes, ask about your story. You want to tell them something comforting, that things will get better, that it was just a bad winter, but all you can think about is the taste of broth made from someone's ribs. So you smile instead, and they flinch. You survived, technically, but whatever version of you stepped off that ship months ago is gone, replaced by something quieter, hungrier, harder. You wear the same face, but it doesn't fit quite right anymore, and the men who just arrived, fresh-faced, full-bellied, eager to build, they don't see a comrade. They see a warning. They see what this place can do. And someday soon, they'll understand why you stopped burying the dead. They don't turn back. That's the first mistake. After everything they see, the sunken faces, the makeshift graves, the stench of a place that's consumed more lives than it's ever supported, they stay. They unpack crates, they take measurements, they talk about progress, they talk about God, they talk about England's destiny. You watch them draw plans for new houses over the places where men rotted through the winter, and you begin to understand that this isn't about survival. It's about refusal. The refusal to admit this was a mistake. They build, or rather, they make you build. The labour falls to the survivors and the newly arrived poor, the ones who came with empty hands and dreams of land. The officers, now puffed up with fresh clothes and new titles, hand out assignments and praise discipline. You lift logs with shaking arms, cut timber with a dull blade, and smear mud between the gaps in another wooden wall that won't survive a storm. The newcomers call it a cottage. You call it a box with ambitions. No one talks about what happened, not directly. The word starvation floats around, detached and vague, like a storm that passed through town before anyone thought to close the windows. The word cannibalism is never spoken, not once, though it lingers like smoke. You can see it in their faces when they glance at you, in the way they avoid standing too close, the way they stop talking when you enter a room. You're part of the place now, the way rot becomes part of the floorboards. They bring more people, more men mostly, but also women now. That's the new plan. Families, reproduction, stability. They think domesticity will civilize the wilderness. They build a few crude homes and assign husbands to women like livestock, pairing strangers with strangers and calling it a colony. You watch as these women step off the boats, squinting into the sun, trying to smile while being led into a place that already smells like failure. Some are wives dragged across the ocean by hopeful husbands. Some are orphans or indentured servants, promised a future in exchange for obedience. All of them are doomed. They plant fields again, this time with actual seeds. They dig trenches, set up sentries, build a palisade twice the size of the first. They install a gallows. They call it precaution. You call it foreshadowing. A church goes up next, nothing more than a shed with a cross nailed to the roof. It's the one building they make sure doesn't leak. The sermons begin again. Lessons on virtue, on hardship, on divine reward for suffering. You sit through them with your head down, pretending you believe, pretending you still hear anything when someone says God. The Powhatan reappear cautiously. The newcomers wave flags and offer gifts, trying to repair what the last wave destroyed. A few peaceful exchanges follow. Corn for tools, tobacco for cloth. But trust isn't something that grows back. The Powhatan keep their distance. You can tell they're watching, not afraid, just waiting. They've seen this cycle before. They know what happens when the food runs out, when the promises break, when the English get desperate again. Supplies come regularly now, at least for a while. Ships arrive with barrels and crates and more idealistic fools. Letters from England are read aloud, praising the colony's fortitude. They use words like resilient, heroic, and providential. You wonder what those same men would say if they saw the bones beneath the gardens. Probably nothing. They'd just rewrite the narrative and move on. That's how empires work, on stories, not facts. People start to believe again, not you, but others. They talk about tobacco as if it's salvation. They say the soil can be tamed, that trade will flourish, that this land, this festering bog of disease and hunger, will someday be a jewel in the crown. You hear the same words you heard before, words like opportunity and growth. You wonder how many more have to die before someone admits this place only grows graves. The newcomers don't know what you've seen. They only see what's left behind. The half-rebuilt fort, the standing walls, the vague idea of persistence. They think this means it's working, that because Jamestown still exists, it must be succeeding. No one considers that a thing can grow and rot at the same time. That survival and decay are not opposites. That sometimes what endures is the disease, not the cure. You try not to speak unless spoken to. You've become one of the quiet ones, the ones who don't smile, don't celebrate, don't pretend. You watch, you work, you wait. At night, you sit by the fire, listening to the young ones talk about farms, families, futures. You think about the friends you buried, the ones you didn't bury, the ones you boiled. You don't tell your story anymore. You don't need to. The colony tells it for you. Jamestown grows, not fast, not well, but it grows, like a tumour, fed by ships and blood and bad decisions. It swells beyond its walls, inch by inch, claiming land, choking forests, pushing deeper into territory it doesn't understand and cannot survive. Every time a ship docks, you wonder how many new bodies it brought. You wonder how long it will take before they're dead too. And no one learns anything. The officers still treat work like a punishment. The council still squabbles over power. The settlers still think the forest will bend to their will. You watch a man plant tobacco next to a grave and talk about his future profits. You want to laugh, but your throat is too dry. You want to scream, but there's no one left to hear it who hasn't already decided this was worth it. They build more houses, they dig more wells, they expand the boundaries. They rename things, trying to overwrite the past with fresh paint and better branding. But the foundation is still the same. Bones, rot, failure. You feel it under your feet, in the walls, in your own chest. Jamestown will not die, that's the tragedy. It should have, but like a wound that never heals, it festers instead, kept alive not by success but by stubbornness, by men who refuse to admit they were wrong, by kings and companies who confuse corpses with progress. You're still here, somehow. And every time a new settler walks past you with bright eyes and a hopeful grin, you want to grab them by the collar and say, "Turn back. There's nothing here for you but suffering." But you don't, because you know they wouldn't listen. No one ever does. You don't go out in a blaze of glory. There's no heroic last stand, no tearful farewell. You don't die clutching a flag or delivering a meaningful speech. You die the way most people here do, quietly, uselessly, and probably alone. Maybe it's your lungs that give out first, full of swamp rot and damp air. Maybe it's your stomach, twisted one too many times by whatever passed for food that week. Maybe it's something simpler, a fever, a fall, a slip of the knife during some half-hearted task. Or maybe you just don't get up one morning, and no one notices for a while. You knew it was coming. Everyone does eventually. The colony doesn't offer second chances. It doesn't reward resilience. It simply waits, slowly chewing through bodies one at a time. Some fight it. Some try to outlast it. Some pray. You stopped doing any of that long ago. By the time it happens, you've already let go. You're too tired to be afraid, too weak to care. You lie down one evening, or slump against a wall, or close your eyes under a tree, and that's the last thing you ever do. Your grave is shallow, if there is one at all, a hole hacked into the frozen earth, just deep enough to keep the wolves from dragging you out too soon. Maybe someone says a few words over you. Maybe they don't. Maybe you're tossed in with someone else, a shared plot for two bodies and no names. You've become more dirt for Virginia to swallow, more fertilizer for the next round of crops, more meat for the colony's myth. No marker, no stone, no memory. The colony doesn't mourn you. It doesn't even slow down. The next day, someone else is using your tools, sleeping in your bunk, wearing what's left of your coat. They might ask your name once just to get the story right, but no one repeats it. There's no point. You are one of hundreds, one of thousands eventually. Just another number on a supply manifest, another labourer lost, another nameless piece of the foundation. And almost immediately, someone new arrives. Fresh off a ship that smells of salt and optimism, a young man stumbles into the fort carrying a pack, and a face full of hope. He looks around at the crooked buildings and muddy paths and doesn't see the rot, the ghosts, the memories burned into the soil. He sees a blank canvas. He sees a future. He doesn't know he just stepped into your shadow. He doesn't know you ever existed. You are replaced without ceremony, not because you didn't matter, but because Jamestown was never built to care about individuals. It's a machine, clumsy, wheezing, always on the brink of collapse, but still turning. It consumes people the way a fire consumes logs. It doesn't stop because one piece of fuel went up in smoke. It just reaches for the next. The newcomers ask questions at first. Why did so many die? What went wrong? You know the answers, but you're no longer here to give them. The men in charge repeat the same script they always have. Bad luck, harsh winters, insufficient supplies. They talk about Indian hostility and the burdens of exploration. They don't mention the hunger. They don't mention the desperate silence that led to cooking your neighbour's bones. They certainly don't mention the man who buried his wife, face down to keep her from being exhumed. The truth is they don't have to lie, they don't need to. The colony itself is the lie. Its continued existence is presented as evidence of success. If it were truly that bad, they say, wouldn't it have failed by now? But the logic is flawed. Jamestown didn't succeed. It endured. And there's a difference. A rotting stump can still stand upright. A corpse can still wear a crown. The place continues to grow. New buildings, new crops, new names scratched into crude logs. They say this is the future of England's empire. That this place, this festering mistake, is a beginning, not an ending. And maybe they're right. Maybe this is what beginnings look like. Not glorious, not noble. Just a lot of people dying badly until someone writes a cleaner version in a history book. Back home, the home you left, the one that never really wanted you anyway, they hear only fragments, glorious reports, revised figures, edited letters. The company spins your death into cautionary tales and character-building anecdotes. Your bones become a lesson. Your suffering becomes early adversity. You're remembered not as a warning, but as proof of determination. They say you were a hero, if they say anything at all. You weren't. You were hungry, and you were tired, and you were unlucky. That's all. And still, the ships keep coming, one after another, full of labourers, orphans, criminals, and optimists, each one thinking they'll be different, smarter, stronger, the ones who'll make it work. And each time, the colony opens its arms and begins the process again. The promises, the failures, the starvation, the quiet burial. Over and over, like clockwork. The rot becomes tradition. The death becomes routine. The misery becomes background noise. And somewhere in the middle of it all, someone finds your old name carved into a beam, half erased by smoke and mould. They trace it with their finger. They wonder who you were. Then they forget and walk away. This is what you built. Not a house, not a farm, not a legacy, a cycle, a self-devouring dream, wrapped in flags and hymns and lies. And when the next man dies, he'll take your place in the dirt. And when he's gone, another will step off the boat to fill his space. That's the rhythm now. That's Jamestown. It doesn't live because it thrives. It lives because it forgets. That's the end of tonight's slow-starving spiral through the mud-soaked graveyard of early Jamestown, a place where hope got dysentery, leadership came with lace cuffs, and survival was just a polite word for cannibalism. Thanks for dragging yourself through this miserable little chapter of colonial history with me. If you're still awake, or just too haunted to sleep, feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about which moment would have finished you off first. The hunger, the disease, or the slow realization that even your corpse wouldn't be special enough to bury. Sleep well,